Hi everyone, I'm Dan Grushkin. I'm the Executive Director of Biodesign Challenge. Thanks for joining us for the last of our webinar series in 2019. Let's just make sure everyone can hear us. Chat in the chat window if you can hear us. All right, that looks good.
Great. Awesome.
Wonderful. It's great seeing you all. Um, so I'm super happy to be doing this webinar with Claire and Debra, Biodesigning the Future of Fashion. We're glad you can all make it today. Um, Very quickly, I'm just going to give you. By the way, this is Veena Vijay Kumar,
Hi.
Program Manager.
Nice to
I'm
meet
sure
you.
you all know her
Yes.
already. The webinar series was created as a resource for students to really create a baseline of knowledge around biodesign. We've recently been opening it up to the public, which has been really fun, and we've been getting a really great diversity of questions. So thank you, general public, for joining us. The session will work as follows. Um, Claire and Deborah will give a presentation for roughly about 45 minutes. If you have questions during the presentation, go ahead and type them in the little chat window. At the end of the presentation, Veena and I will moderate your questions, and hopefully we'll get to them all. With that, Claire and Deborah. Thank you, Claire and Deborah, for both being a sponsor and an educator in the Biodesign Challenge.
All right, so I'm going to just give a very quick intro to both of you. So Claire Bergkamp is a worldwide director of sustainability and innovation at Stella McCartney. During her tenure, she has helped establish the brand's leadership and reputation in sustainability by developing its environmental and social improvement strategy and working across the brand and its supply chain internationally to implement it. Claire has focused particularly on sustainable raw material development and procurement, as well as driving alternative materials and innovation. She also oversees Stella McCartney's ethical trade and community outreach programs. Debra Guo is Stella McCartney's sustainability manager. Before joining Stella McCartney, she was a sustainability and climate change consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where she primarily worked with carrying on their annual environmental profit and loss. In her role at Stella McCartney, Debra works with suppliers and supply chain teams to implement sustainable sourcing initiatives and resource the environmental impact of the supply chain. So thank you, Claire and Debra. It looks like we may have
We might have
lost them for a
All right,
second.
well,
So let's give them a second to jump back on.
okay. While we do that, we'll just fill you in on how the challenge has been going.
Yeah, sure.
It's been great. We're coming on June 20th and 21st. Those are the dates of the summit. You're, of course, all welcome to join us. And I think we have them back. So mark your calendars, June 20th and 21st. We'll be hosting it this year at Parsons on the first day and the Museum of Modern Art on the second day. This year's a big year for us. We've moved into the largest theater that MoMA has. So we have 400 seats to fill. So wherever you are in the world, we would love to meet you and see you there. We have 36 different teams from all over the world participating. Um,
Yeah, and we'll be
countries.
sending out the invite today. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll be able to see our Eventbrite with all of the information, all of our judges and the schools that are participating.
And also speakers. Are we? No, we're not telling you about the speakers.
You'll find out about speakers very soon.
Yes, we have a fantastic lineup that keep the build up going. One last thing, you can check us out on Twitter at Biodesigned. So the handle is at Biodesigned, and you can sign up to our mailing list on our website if you just go down to the bottom of the page. All right. Well, Stella, I think we have them here just in time. Okay. All right. So we're going to pass the floor over. Debra, it is all yours. We are going to go invisible
and make sure you hit the mic button at the top too, so we can hear you.
Oh yeah, good call.
Just make sure we can hear you before we go off.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, so we're
Yay!
gonna turn our
I'm
mic
so sorry
and
about
camera on.
All right.
that. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that technical difficulty we just had. Claire's had to run off, but just by way of introduction, Claire is the Sustainability Director, Worldwide Sustainability Director at Stella McCartney, and I am the Environmental Sustainability Manager. So it's my absolute honour to speak to you today and share with you the Stella McCartney story and approach to sustainability. And then Claire is going to join back in later and talk to you about what we're looking for with the Biodesign Challenge prize winners this year, and in general, what we see the potential for biotech being in the kinds of issues that we address on a day-to-day basis. So for those of you that don't know anything about Stella McCartney, we are a British luxury fashion brand. Stella McCartney is famous for being vegetarian, and she started the company in 2001 with that being the core value of the business. So a vegetarian luxury fashion brand, which is quite unusual. And since then, our approach has sort of evolved in the number of issues that we address, and Stella McCartney has always tried to use her business to address those issues and her voice as well. So I'm going to start with the problems that we try to tackle, the kind of damage that the industry has done over the many, many years that it's been operating in this way, and then how we try to use the business and our supply chain, especially on materials, to address those issues. So, slide. You may have seen different versions of this statistic, but the fashion industry is always quoted as one of the most polluting industries in the world. When you think about all the different materials that are extracted on a daily basis, that are then treated and washed, going into spinning, into yarn, and then woven into fabric or knitted straight into products, and all the garment manufacturing and the transport involved and the chemicals involved in that process. It's a dirty industry. And it also requires a lot of resources. This is a statistic about World Earth Overshoot Day, which is the first day in the year that we've used up that year's allowance of resources that the Earth can replenish. And it's been getting earlier and earlier every year, and last year it was the earliest that it's ever been. It was the 1st of August. So essentially after that, all the water and clean air and soil that we were using for any production, for any consumption, was essentially borrowing into next year. And there are a lot of statistics that say that that the global average citizen, the way that we're consuming now, would require 1.7 Earths to satisfy that demand every year. And I've seen even higher statistics for the kinds of lifestyles that we live in, that we have in the more developed countries. I've seen up to 5 planets, which is really insane. So this is another issue that we look at a lot that's quite recent, but it's highlighting the waste and overconsumption in the fashion industry. And this was a photo shoot that we did for our spring 2017 campaign. We chose to do it in a landfill in Scotland, specifically highlighting just how many resources we use and how quickly they're ending up in landfill, especially in the fashion industry. So Stella McCartney, we like to think of ourselves as redefining luxury fashion, showing that you can have beautiful products that don't compromise on sustainability. You can have both. Stella always talks about how the industry is in many ways quite old-fashioned, in that we've been doing things the same way, manufacturing the same way, consuming the same way for a long, long time, and using the same group of materials that we have been for many years. And now it's time that we look to the future and think of more innovative ways of doing that are much lower impact. So, I mean, from the very start of the company, we've never used leather or fur as a vegetarian business, but now we're looking at really pioneering cutting edge materials and processes in the textile manufacturing process. We're talking a lot more about circular business models and circular materials, which is directly trying to tackle that problem of the waste and overconsumption in the industry. Out of all of our materials, we've been speaking a lot about our viscose, which I'll talk more about in a bit. But that is really trying to protect ancient and endangered forests, which I don't think people realise viscose can originate from. And our whole sustainability strategy, and a lot of what I do at the company, is using a groundbreaking tool that we've developed together with the Caring Group to measure our impact. So this is our mission statement, and our core values as a business is to be modern, responsible, and cruelty-free. And one thing I wanted to mention, which is quite new and something we've been speaking a lot about recently, at the end of last year, Stella signed the UN Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action. The IPCC, which is the main scientific body for climate change, came out with quite an alarming report last year that said we only have 12 years to stop dangerous climate change, and we're basically on the road to disaster if we keep operating the way that we are, which is really doom and gloom, I'm sorry. But the UN have started to work more directly with industry, which is quite unusual. They normally work directly with governments, but I think they came to a realization that that isn't moving quick enough, and industry has a lot of potential to address these challenges, especially because we're the ones using so many resources on a daily basis. So they asked a number of brands, as many as possible, to commit to this fashion charter for climate action, and Stella was the face of that. And as part of that, we signed many commitments in how we decarbonise our supply chain and setting roadmaps and targets to do that. But this is really calling on brands to work together in a way that we never have before, and to talk about climate change, which there actually hasn't been many forums for fashion to speak about that and to work together to address. So this is a huge focus now for the business, and a big part of how we look at the materials that we're using and their footprint, but also the entire supply chain, how we transport materials, how we operate our stores, how we speak to our manufacturing suppliers about this. So when we look at environmental sustainability and the impact of the whole company, we like to break it up across different tiers in the supply chain. And we do this by using a tool called the Environmental Profit and Loss tool, which is something that Kering and Puma started working on. Kering is the fashion house that used to own us, but Stella has recently bought her company back and we're now an independent company. But when we were part of the group, we were very much involved in the building of this Environmental Profit and Loss tool. And that is the tool that they use to measure a brand or the entire group's environmental impact. And that is measured and communicated in monetary values. So we'll go from saying, in 1 year we used however many kilograms of each different fibres, and we manufactured in these countries, and this is the volume of our products that we produced, and we operated our stores using this much energy and this much water consumption. And that then gets modelled with a lot of life cycle analysis data, which looks at every single manufacturing process and raw material process, and the impacts that would generate in terms of how much water would be needed for that raw material extraction or that fabric dyeing process, and how many carbon emissions that would release, and what air and water pollutants that would release as well. And that then gets turned into a monetary value. So how many euros of damage, or how many euros would we owe to nature, essentially, for operating as we did last year. And we very quickly learned from our results that the biggest impact in our supply chain comes from the raw material extraction phase. And from the very, very beginning, yes. Yeah, so after the raw material extraction stage, we then have the processing of those raw materials. And then it goes into our manufacturing supply chain, so spinning, weaving, dyeing of fabrics, and then garment making. And then our direct operations, so how we run our stores and our offices, tends to contribute about 10% to our total environmental impact. So we naturally started looking at the raw materials that we use and understanding what's driving the impact of which raw materials. I think this is a good slide to explain what our results look like and how we make these decisions. So if we start with the diagram on the right, this is our supply chain broken up by those tiers. So starting with tier 4, the raw materials, and then ending at tier 0 at our stores and warehouses and offices. Look across those tiers and then across six environmental impact areas. So air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, waste, water consumption, and water pollution. And we use this to map where do we know those impacts are coming from, where are the hotspots, what should we be doing, how can we be sourcing more lower impact materials, what alternatives are there, what innovations are there. And so at tier 4, we know that, for example, that land use bubble is really related to all the natural fibers that we use, like cotton and wool. They require a lot of land, and a lot of that land tends to be converted from more pristine conditions just for farming and cultivation. And then water consumption tends to be related to cotton as well, and then water pollution is mostly linked to the metals that we use. Specifically brass, because that uses a lot of copper, which is not a particularly nice mining process. And then, as you can see, greenhouse gas emissions you get quite an even distribution across all the different tiers. So we need to look at that really holistically. And then the graph on the left shows you the different material categories that we use, the different fibers that we use. Underneath in the grey boxes, that's the amount in kilograms or quantity in kilograms of those fibres that we used. And then above that is our environmental profit and loss impact in euros. So you can see that even though wool isn't our most used fibre, it's our highest impact material. And then if you look at cotton, conventional cotton versus organic cotton, even though we use less conventional cotton, the impact is still higher because it's a much higher impact fibre than organic cotton, which feeds into our internal conversations about why we should continue to drive up that organic cotton usage because it's so much better than conventional. So then just going into quickly an overview of our key materials and what we're doing for each of those to make sure they're as sustainable as possible. With our viscose, which, as I said, originates from forests, we were approached by an NGO called Canopy in 2014 that asked us to commit to making sure that our viscose does not come from ancient or endangered forests. And that required us to map out all the viscose in our supply chain, ask every single supplier to tell us exactly where it's coming from, not just which country, but which forest it's coming from. And we discovered that one of our fabric suppliers was using a viscose from Germany, which was originating from an FSC certified forest in Sweden. And once we learned that that supply chain existed, we just started working in making sure that all of our suppliers were doing this too, because for us that was the most visible supply chain. Claire has been out and visited that entire supply chain. In 2016 we achieved that, so we met our commitment. And since then, we've just been maintaining that and making sure that everyone is using certified viscose pulp that comes from Sweden. And our supply chain then, yeah, as I said, it goes to Germany after that, where it's made into a viscose filament fibre, and then it's woven into a fabric in Italy, like the majority of our fabrics. With cotton, organic cotton performs much better than conventional cotton because cotton is an extremely toxic and thirsty crop. Farmers tend to use loads of fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, and cotton just consumes so much water to grow. And organic cotton requires those farmers to stop using all of those chemical inputs for 3 years, and then they can achieve certified organic cotton status. But we also champion this because as part of that and the certification process that we ask for organic cotton, there's a really big requirement on social conditions for farmers and also environmental standards along the whole supply chain. So looking at all the chemicals that then get used for that cotton fabric as well. So that is a really, really important focus area for us. With regenerated cashmere, this was a really big learning for us from the environmental profit and loss. That graph that you saw that compared the different fibres and how much we use of them versus what their impact is, that used to look like cashmere being our biggest impact, even though we only ever use a tiny, tiny amount for our knitwear. And that's because cashmere, when compared to wool especially, has 100 times the impact. Because you need a lot more cashmere goats to produce one sweater. But also there's just been such an over demand for cashmere that it means the goat population in Mongolia, which is where the majority of cashmere is from, has just grown so much. And the way that they kind of eat the grass and trample on the grass means that that soil over there has become really degraded to the point that it's just desertified now. You can't grow anything there anymore. And that land use impact comes up as really, really high in our environmental profit and loss. So we actually made a business decision to just stop using virgin cashmere. And now we only use regenerated cashmere, which is pre-consumer waste. So waste that is essentially gathered from the factory floors and is now turned into a product. So we don't source anything directly from Mongolia anymore. Actually, all comes from Italy and the fabric and yarn production there, and just reusing that waste fibre from that supply chain. So, as I mentioned before, we're looking at the circular economy and circular business models a lot more, and we're working really closely with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a think tank in the UK that has really led a lot of the research into the wastefulness of the fashion industry. And they released a report 2 years ago now called A New Textiles Economy, where they came up with a lot of really scary statistics, but they found out that only 1% of textiles is currently being recycled back into textiles, which means majority is actually going straight to landfill or being incinerated. And they also said that one garbage truck of textile waste is burned or landfilled every second, which is just terrifying. And that kind of struck everyone into action. And now they have the Make Fashion Circular initiative, which we're a partner of, and having a lot of discussions with the whole industry about how we tackle this, not just with other brands, but with government policymakers, with recycling companies, and looking at waste infrastructure in different geographies as well. Because this is a really, really big problem that's going to need all stakeholders on board. And just to explain, with the circular economy and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and cradle to cradle principles behind it, we really see two different types of materials. You have one cycle, which is the biological materials, which is what we would essentially call natural fibers. So fibers that are from a renewable resource that would ideally biodegrade at the end of its life back into the soils and provide a nutrient for the soils and close that loop in that way. And the most important thing there is that we have to make sure that there were no toxic chemicals and only safe chemicals used in that whole process, so that when it does return to the soils, it can be that nutrient and it's not harming that soil or its soil health in any way. The other cycle or type group of materials is the technical materials. So synthetic materials that come from non-renewable resources like polyester. And for that, what we would want to see is that staying in the system, being perpetually recycled forever and ever, and not really extracting anything new, because there's enough in the system already. There's no need to be tapping into that oil anymore for those materials. So we're looking at this in two ways. There's making sure that we're designing our products using circular design principles. So really keeping in mind all the time what's going to happen to that product at the end of its life. Can it be resold? Can it be repurposed? Is it recyclable? Is it biodegradable? Making sure that we're following the guidelines with what kinds of chemicals allow it to be safely returned to soils. This is actually, the shoe that you see is called our loop shoe, and that was our first big kind of example of how we use circular design principles to address a problem with shoes that you normally get when you want to do something with them at the end of life, which is they're so difficult to take apart, and there's so many components that go into one shoe that it's very, very, very hard to recycle them. And we know that glues in the shoe production process themselves can be very toxic. So we worked on this for many, many years, but we came up with a loop shoe, which is designed to use no glue. It just uses a stitching and interlocking system for the upper and the sole, so that when you're done with it at the end of the life, or if it needs to be repaired halfway through its life, you can take them apart really easily and replace the sole, replace the upper, or at the end of its life, have the two go off to their different waste streams or recycling streams. The other thing we look at a lot are circular materials, especially recycled materials, like in the technical materials circle that you saw before. So nylon is a synthetic material that comes from petroleum or oil, and we started a partnership with a Italian company called Aquafil, who make a recycled nylon called EcoNil, and they take fishing nets and carpets and waste garments and recycle that back to a recycled nylon yarn that is of the exact same quality as a virgin yarn. And they do that using a chemical recycling process. But what's really interesting for us is they're guaranteeing that quality of the virgin nylon yarn. So there's really no compromise being made. And everything that they make can go back into their recycling process, into another recycled nylon yarn, because they really break it down to its very basic building blocks, the monomers, and then build that back up to a polymer. So this can happen over and over again. There's no degradation of the quality over time. And then moving into what we're most well known for and what kind of was at the heart of the company from the very beginning, using vegetarian and cruelty-free materials. So Stella has never used leather, fur, feathers, skins. What you see here is an example of our alternative leather materials and our fur-free fur, which are both at the moment coming from synthetic sources. So they're non-renewable. We wouldn't call them sustainable, but we try and make them in the most sustainable way. So using solvent-free polyurethane as much as we can for the leathers. And yeah, this is for us a huge focus area when it comes to biotech. We would really love to find more sustainable alternatives for our vegetarian materials. And we've seen a lot of movement in the kind of more natural alternative leather materials recently. Like, I'm sure you've heard of pineapple leathers and apple leathers and what else is there? So many different fruit and vegetable leathers and plant-based leathers. For us, we've been developing something together with Bolt Threads, which I'm going to talk about after this in more detail, but they have started making a leather alternative made from mycelium, which is the underground root structure of mushrooms, which is a renewable material. It's something that they can actually grow in their lab really, really quickly. And for us, it has the right hand feel, it looks like leather, even kind of smells like leather, it's really crazy. But as soon as we saw this, compared to the other materials that we saw in the industry that were on offer, this kind of suits our product type the best, and we've already made our iconic Falabella bag out of it, just as a proof of concept. But that's already shown in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which is really exciting. But our partnership with Bulk Threads really started from their vegan silk, and this was kind of where our biotech journey began many, many years ago, when with our desire and need for a vegan silk. And there was suddenly a lot of companies that were looking into bioengineering of silk, and for us, Bulk Threads made the most sense, and we've been working with them for many years now on this vegan silk. But it's grown in their lab in California, just from yeast and sugar and water. It's really crazy, but we've already made the yellow dress that you've seen, and the purple or brownish garments that you see on the right. And that's also shown in the Victoria and Albert Museum and in MoMA as well in New York. And that's really exciting for us. It's something where we really see that innovation, and biotech is allowing us to have a material that is 100% cruelty-free, that kind of doesn't exist at the moment, and find solutions for things that are so much lower impact, and then also allow us to get away from using non-renewable materials. Lastly, just wanted to show you this. Stella has started speaking out a lot more about all of the issues that I've mentioned. But one thing that's also quite new is working really closely with policymakers and government now, and really trying to shift the industry as fast as we can. And I know that regulation and governments play a huge role in that. One thing that's been happening a lot in the UK is that the government has launched this big inquiry into the impacts of fashion, both environmentally and on the social side of things. So how are you protecting your workers, and how are you managing the environmental footprint of your business? And that's something that we've been really involved in. Claire actually went to Parliament last year and gave evidence on how we do all of that. So something we're really involved with, especially with the UN work now, working together with the UN and many, many brands in different working groups to look at different footprints of materials, which we know a lot from that environmental profit and loss tool, sharing that knowledge with the rest of the industry, also looking at the logistics in the supply chain, and how do we decarbonize across the whole supply chain, and what can we do with our mills and the manufacturing processes. So it's really exciting and quite a new direction for the company. Yeah, this is really what our dream is for the future of fashion. I think the best thing that we could ask for is that customers or citizens stop buying and buying and buying without thinking. We want to show them what we're doing and spread more awareness through our tools, through our knowledge, and through our products, of why we're doing them, and what are those issues that they may not realise the fashion industry has been contributing to for such a long time. And we want them to start asking more questions and doing their research, and eventually being more conscious in their consumption. So that is actually the full presentation now. I think Claire's just wrapping up, but maybe I could take a couple of those questions before she comes back and talks about the challenge in more detail. I can see one about the EPNL.
Yeah. Why don't let's start with that. So I think this one comes from Corinne. Is there a free resource available for regular folks to look at the environmental the cost? Well, yeah, the environmental cost of the clothing that they purchase.
This doesn't exist yet. There are loads of reports that Kering and Stella McCartney now have released, either on the methodology side of it or how to understand our results and what we're doing. I know that Kering did come up with a mobile app that allows you to play around and decide. I think they have 4 different product types you can kind of hypothetically make, and decide which materials you want to use for that and where you want to source those materials from. And then it kind of shows you the impact that your different sourcing decisions can make on the EPNL of that product. But as for the tool being publicly available, it's not yet. But what we're hoping to do this year at Stella is, so we're in the process of leaving Kering, and as part of that, we're kind of reviewing and reworking the environmental profit and loss methodology so that it's just more reflective of the materials that we use at Stella, and what our supply chain looks like, because it's much smaller than the whole Kering group supply chain. And at the end of the year, we want to release as much of that information as we can, and for that to be publicly available. It won't be a tool, but it will be a lot more transparent about, you know, where we get our data and information from, what kind of assumptions have we made, where there are data gaps, and hopefully how you could take some of that into what you do. If you're thinking of designing a product, what could you learn from what we've done in the materials that you choose, or how you choose to manufacture it, or source things from. So I hope that answers your question. There's a lot more information that we can share for sure after this as well.
Also about circularity, you know, you started to describe the principles of circularity. I think specifically for our students, that's a really important concept.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the principles that underlie the ethos?
Yeah, so I think in the fashion industry there's many components, but I think what we want to tackle is the amount of waste that's being generated, either in the way that we manufacture our products, because there is a lot of waste in the supply chain, either from the fabrics that you produce or products that don't get sold, but also the end of life of those products, and making sure that customers know that at the end of the life that product right now is ending up in landfill or being incinerated. And then, of course, when that happens, to make a new product, you would then extract new materials rather than reusing what's already in the system. And I think it's just slowly changing people's idea that there isn't really such thing as waste, that all waste has a value. If it's a product or material that's not necessarily in great condition, that doesn't mean that it's waste. It means that you just need to be more inventive in how you give that another life. But there's already so much circulating in the system. There's just no need to have linear business models anymore, where you're making, disposing of everything such high speed. And that's essentially what we're fighting against through business models, through materials, through the way we design. Oh, I'm just going to pass over to Claire, who's the stuff here. Oh, I think that's another one. Oh, sorry. Hi guys, sorry. Microphone confusion. Sorry, I was a little late joining back, but hi, I'm Claire. I'm sorry we didn't get to do the intro because everything crashed. But I'm the Global Director for Sustainability and Innovation for Stella McCartney. You've obviously met Debra. I'm sure she gave you a nice overview into everything. Have you talked about the biotech kind of world a bit more? A little bit, okay. Both threads. So I think like the one message I wanted to make sure that I shared with everybody today was, number one, how excited we are about this. It's our second year participating in this challenge and working with Dan, and I think that we're so just really excited about this space and the possibility, especially of working with students that are interested in the same things that we're interested in. I mean, as Debra just talked you through, sustainability is kind of everything for us. The reason I wasn't here is I was in a meeting with Stella where we're talking about, we're meeting with this company that wants to set up a whole new way of selling. You know, like this is our day-to-day, like this really is who we are. And so when it comes to innovation, it's what we believe in is the future in a really pure way. And we think that biotech has the potential to really unlock the next wave of what sustainability within the fashion context can look like. Especially for us around animal-free materials and pushing sustainability to a level and into a space that I think we can only kind of dream of right now. So we're really, really excited. And this is, like I said, our second year. So it's going to be great. So I know that Debra was answering questions.
It seems like probably we should dive back into that. Is there anything specific that you guys wanted to ask me? It sounds like you're talking to Debra a little bit about, let's see here.
It's quite a big one.
Have you done this one yet?
No, we did on this.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you. This is with regard to working with biotechnology. There's a lot of discomfort in the public with biotechnology, and Stella has embraced it. How does it contend with public discomfort?
So for us, I mean, we're very aware of the public discomfort around biotech. Okay. I think that the way we contend with it is we do a lot of due diligence around the people that we work with. So, I mean, we love what biotech represents and the possibilities that it represents, but it doesn't mean that we would work with just anyone. So the partnerships that we have with biotech startups, with innovators, all have a level of scrutiny that's been applied to them to ensure that, you know, any waste materials, whatever kind of modification is happening, is being done under a very strict control with within regulation, and because the regulations are lax, actually even higher than anything that could be regulated. So any of the companies that we have worked with or would work with, we expect them to come to the table with a really strict set of standards in place, and themselves having a good understanding of what the risks are, what the discomfort is, and bringing sustainability in even on top of that at every single stage. So like with Bolt Threads, that's a great example. You know, when we talk to them about the fiber or the Milo, they're thinking ahead even more than we can about what the impact of every input is, what the processing is going to look like, how is it going to be dyed, you know, how much energy is going to go in. So even on top of the concerns around biotech, you know, the partners that we choose are looking at the full life cycle, the full impact, so that what's being generated, what's being created is truly a better solution, not just something that's exciting.
And how has the public responded to all
That
of
answer
this?
it, Dan?
It does answer it. So how have you been able to measure some of the public reaction to Stella's embracing of these technologies?
I mean, our experience thus far has been very positive. I think that we haven't had any serious concerns. I will be honest that we haven't commercialized any of our innovations, so we haven't brought them out to the public in a sales way. We're working on that now. But everything that we've launched has either been a museum piece or just kind of a design, you know, press piece. So I think that there's only been positive reactions, but when we move into the phase of commercialization, you know, how we tell that story to your average customer, that's something we're thinking through now and thinking about what we want to say, how we want to say it, and what kind of assurance we want to provide people that what they're buying or participating, you know, with is a safe product. But in a lot of ways, that's how we think about everything. You know, we want all of our products to be safe, you know, safe for the environment, safe for people, safe for animals. And so that same kind of wanting to make people feel like we've done all the hard work for them when they get to us is really how we treat everything, you know. Stella always says that, you know, one of her favorite things she's been told by her friends and by people that shop with us is that when they walk into the store, they feel like we've done all the work for them, you know, so that they can come in and know that anything they're buying from us, you know, even if it's not perfect, because we're not 100% sustainable, we are not a perfect brand, but every single product that's on the shelf has had some sort of consideration behind it, and we've done what we can. And again, it's not all perfect, we haven't solved everything, but there's no product that we haven't at least talked about and thought about. And that's, you know, I think that's a very unique ethos to us as a brand. And that's kind of what we expect for anyone, you know, coming into this project, anyone we're working with is, we want you to think through every single step, you know, like no matter whatever the process is, whatever the step is, could this be better? You know, could it be shipped less miles? Could there be less packaging? You know, could it have a recycled input, or does it need to be recycled at the end? You know, just like asking yourself as many questions as you can. That's what we're doing, and that's what we'd be doing with anything that was a biotech product as well.
That's excellent advice, especially for our students who are working through their projects now and really trying to think about all those steps and all of those impacts in each of those steps. So thanks for saying that. It's really encouraging. I'm going to go back to the question of circularity that Orly asked in the chat, and that's really about how do we change the industry itself to accommodate circularity. She mentions, the seasons in fashion contributing to mass consumption. What needs to change in fashion in general in order to be more circular?
Everything, I think is the answer to that question. Everything has to change for fashion to really be more circular. I think that it's all about, the way we think about it, and it will only kind of answer your question truthfully, is that what our responsibility is to produce high quality products that have value in them, and once those products are in the world, we need to maintain that value for as long as possible. So, if you're using something and you're done with it, resell it, rent it, whatever, just keep things going in the economy for as long as possible. And I think that when we're talking about the circular economy and circularity, the economy piece actually gets left out a lot, which is kind of what you're saying about seasons is, we're all talking about recycling, and that is critical. Like, we need better recycling technologies, we need better solutions, but making this a viable economic reality is a big part of this, and rethinking, what a business is responsibility towards their customer and towards their product to make sure that things stay in the economy for as long as possible and maintain their value for as long as possible is a big piece of it. But that really is pretty radical and does require the industry to change. And I think what we can do as individuals is stop treating things as disposable. It's like, it sounds quite simple, but when we buy something for $2.99, we don't treat it with any love because we associate, like, emotional durability is tied so closely to cost and price right now that, there is a dichotomy and kind of a breakdown of how much we respect our products and our clothing. And I think that's something we can all take into our day-to-day lives, is that no matter how much we're paying for something, a huge amount of work went into it. Whether you're paying $1,000 or $10, a lot of resources went into making that thing, so we should try and treat it as well as we can. And again, think about its value and not try and dispose of things without really using them and loving them. Dan, I think you guys might still be on mute, or should we just keep on answering questions?
Great. Oh, hang on.
We're okay now.
You're
We're
good.
okay.
You're good.
Next question. I guess this is a question about eco-friendly alternatives. What's out there right now that seems to be working or heading in the right direction? And then can you talk a little bit about future materials? I think Stella, above many other brands, is really exploring this in a robust, full-bodied way. And love to hear more about some of those other materials.
What's working out there right now, I think, we have to look for things that are really certified. That's what the best thing a brand, any company can do, or the most basic thing any company can do is look for things that have a certification attached to them. There's a lot of materials that don't, and some of those are the newer materials, but, Oh, it's okay. I just went black for a minute. We're okay. A good example of, something that's kind of a gray area material will be something made with ocean waste or ocean plastic, which is such an exciting area, where we're taking things out of the ocean, we're using it, but there's no certification to say how much ocean plastic was used. Is it 1%? Is it 20%? But when you're looking at things like organic cotton or global recycling standard or FSC, these certifications that have some kind of rigor behind them, I think that's what's working. Like when we apply some sort of rigorous approach to what we're talking about, that's great. But when it comes to new materials, that doesn't always exist. And I think that's the kind of interesting space around where it's not certified and you have to kind of bring in an analysis, a life cycle assessment. Debra talked about the EPNL. We use these internal tools to help us understand the impact, but not every company always does that also, so I think it's a balance. And when it comes to new materials, honestly, the biotech space is a big piece for us, especially our partnership with Bolt Threads. There's other companies we talk to in that area as well. And then recycled materials really is huge. Textile to textile recycling. There are some companies that are more at scale, companies like Econil, which does that with nylon. But there's companies that, like Evernew, that's doing it with cotton waste, which is really exciting. Or we're starting to work with a company that's able to recycle polyester back into polyester. And those sound like such basic things, but they are quite revolutionary and kind of on the cutting edge of what the next wave of recycled will look like, which will be high quality output, where you're getting something that's the same quality that you put in or higher quality, and done in the way that the company we're looking at. Again, the companies are approaching it with the interest of making sure that it's low impact, low energy, water, really thinking about how do we recycle something in a way that is truly low impact.
All right, I'm going to finish with one last question. If I were a student in this space and I wanted to more deeply work with sustainable materials, with companies that are exploring these new materials, how do I do that?
Well, one thing you can do if you are a student wanting to work with sustainable materials is just use what's on the planet already. Honestly, there is a lot of waste out there, and that's an easy way to be sustainable without having to start dealing with ordering fabrics and dealing with minimums and dealing with supply chain. I was speaking at an event this weekend here in London called Study Hall. They're great. It's a great event. I think they live stream a bit of it. But one of the designers that was on the panel I was on was this young up-and-coming designer in London that had just had a partnership with Adidas, and her whole thing is upcycling. She goes to the jobbers, she goes to the rag houses, and she creates from what we already have. So that's one really easy way if you're a designer, to do it. And I know this is not new, like upcycling is not new, but I think we have more waste than we've ever had. So there's definitely more materials to choose from than there ever was. And especially because countries don't want our waste anymore, so it should be more local, which should make it a little bit easier for you. And then I think as far as working with companies, you just look for companies that share some part of your values. I say this to people all the time, to students, like you don't have to be in the sustainability team to make a difference. If you are a designer, be a designer. Go be radical from within inside, and build up your knowledge, know what works, know what the quality issues are, try and learn as much as you can about the challenges a designer is going to face. But, you don't have to be part of our team to make a difference. Like, Debra and I can't design. We can do lots of other great stuff, but we're not designers. So I say stick with whatever you're good at and just enter into a company that is starting to think about this, and you can make a change no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's also what Claire was talking about at Study Hall on Saturday, but just stay authentic self and doing your research and kind of trying to be aware of like what's resonating with you. Which of the issues is it? Is it like cruelty-free, animal-free materials? Is it climate change? Is it water scarcity? And then finding those brands or those partners that you want to work with that align with that as well.
Wow. Claire, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. Debra, I'm so excited to have you at the summit. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yes, thank you.
I'm grateful. I'm sure the students are grateful. And again, thanks for supporting us now 2 years in a row. We're really excited to see what the students come up with this year. And we're excited to see it roll out into the world and be part of what the future of fashion looks like.
And to all the participants, if you have additional questions, please do, you can send it to the Biodesign Challenge team through Canvas, and we can forward it along to Claire and Deborah, and then, we'll answer those questions for you.
And don't forget, June 20th and 21st, we'll see you there, hopefully. If you can't make it, I know some of you are coming from far away. We're live streaming the second day, so you can join us that way as well. Thank you both. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
It's always a pleasure.
Always our pleasure. We're excited. Thanks, guys.